Today is September the 18th, 2019. Welcome to the Personal Computer Show. I'm Hank Key and my colleague is Joe King. Do you know who has your personal data? Do you know how Facebook, Google, and Amazon and the other big tech companies are using your personal data? Our website is pcradioshow.org. We can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, prn.fm, streaming on the Internet. Podcasts of the program is available on prn.fm on the Internet and pcradioshow.org. To listen to the live program on the telephone each Wednesday at 6 p.m., the number is 641-793-7091. You can leave me a message if you have any questions or comments at hank@pcradioshow.org. In the news this week, GNU founder Richard Stallman resigns from MIT. Comcast, cable giants sue Maine over law forcing them to offer a la carte programming. Most of the robocalls you get aren't coming from AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile. And how secure is Chromebook versus the PC and the MacBook? From the editorial segment. From the IT Pro Series, presenting Benjamin Rockwell with business-level tech support. From the Tech Corner, I'll be talking about the new AT&T-Verizon partnership and how it's going to raise antitrust eyebrows. The iPhone 11 feels more like catching up than a breakthrough in innovation. And what we know so far about unusual Windows 10 1909 update. Presenting Tech Perspectives with Marty WInston on Winterizing Personal Tech. GNU founder Richard Stallman resigns from MIT Free Software Foundation. Caused a fire, Stallman grew after his comments about victims of Jeffrey Epstein. After reports revealed the length undertaken by some at MIT to accept donations from convicted sex offender and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, MIT Media Lab Director Joy Ito resigned, and now computer scientist Richard Stallman, founder of the GNU operating system and author of an associated manifesto that pushed the idea of free software, has stepped down from his position with MIT's CSAIL, which stands for the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, as the president of the Free Software Foundation. This comes after growing calls for his removal, most recently tied to Stallman's statements in an MIT email thread about Epstein's victim, Virginia Giuffre, on what he called the injustice of claiming she was assaulted by Marvin Minsky. Marvin Minsky was an American cognitive scientist concerned largely with research of artificial intelligence, and he was the co-founder of the MIT AI Lab and author of several texts covering AI and philosophy. According to Stallman, the teenager could have been presented as entirely willing, while also arguing over the use of terms like rape or sexual assault to describe the situation. Richard Stallman submitted the following letter. September 16th. To the MIT community. I am resigning effective immediately from my position in CSAIL at MIT. I am doing this due to the pressure on MIT and me over a series of misunderstandings and mischaracterizations. Richard Stallman. Many computer users run a modified version of the GNU system every day without realizing it. Through a peculiar turn of events, the version of GNU which is widely used today is often called Linux, and many of its users are not aware that it is basically the GNU system developed by the GNU project. There really is a Linux, and these people are using it, but it's just part of the system they use. Linux is the kernel, the program in the system that allocates the machine resources to the other programs that you run. The kernel is an essential part of an operating system, but useless by itself. It can only function in the context of a complete operating system. Linux is normally used in combination with the GNU operating system. The whole system is basically GNU with Linux added, or GNU Linux. All the so-called Linux distributions are really distributions of GNU Linux. Many users do not understand the difference between the kernel, which is Linux, and the host system, which they also call Linux. The ambiguous use of the name doesn't help people understand. These users often think that Linus Torvalds developed the whole operating system in 1991 with a bit of help. Programmers generally know that Linux is a kernel, but since they have generally heard the host system called Linux as well, they often envision a history that would justify naming the host system after the kernel. For example, many believe that once Linus Torvalds finished writing Linux, the kernel, its users looked around for other free software to go with it and found that it, for no other particular reason, most everything necessary to make a Unix-like system was already available. What they found was no accident. It was the not quite complete GNU system. The available free software added up to a complete system because the GNU project had been working since 1984 to make one. Richard Stallman wrote the following. In the GNU manifesto, we set forth the goal of developing a free Unix-like system called GNU. The initial announcement of the GNU project also outlines some of the original plans for the GNU system. By the time Linux was started, GNU was also finished. Most free software projects have the goal of developing a particular program for a particular job. For example, Linus Torvalds set out to write a Unix-like kernel. Donald Knuth set out to write a text formatter, TeX, T-E-X, and Bob Schiefler set out to develop a Windows-like system, the X-Window system. It's natural to measure the contribution of this kind of project by specific programs that came from the project. If we tried to measure the GNU project's contribution in this way, what would we have concluded? One CD-ROM vendor found that in their Linux distribution, GNU software was the largest single contingent, around 28% of the total source code, and this included some of the essential major components without which there could be no system. Linux itself was about 3%. The proportions in 2008 are similar in the main repository, GNUsense. Linux is 1.5% and GNU packages are 15%. So if you're going to pick a name for the system based on who wrote the programs in the system, the most appropriate single choice would be GNU. By the way, GNU means GNU, not Unix. But that is not the deepest way to consider the question. The GNU project is not a project to develop specific software packages. It was not a project to develop a C compiler. Although we did that, it was a project to develop a text editor, and although we developed one, the GNU project set out to develop a complete free Unix-like system, GNU. Many people have made major contributions to the free software in the system, and they all deserve credit for their software. But the reason it is an integrated system and not just a collection of useful programs is because the GNU project set out to make it one. We made a list of the programs needed to make a complete free system, and we systematically wrote people to write everything on the list. We wrote essential but unexciting components because you can't have a system without them. Some of our system components, the programming tools, became popular on their own among programmers, but we wrote many components that are not tools. We even developed a chess game because a complete system needs games too. By the early 90s, we had put together the whole system aside from the kernel. We had also started a kernel, the GNU Herd, which runs on top of Mac. Developing this kernel has been a lot harder than we expected. The GNU Herd started working reliably in 2001, but is a long way from being ready for people to use in general. Fortunately, we didn't have to wait for the Herd because of Linux. Once Torvalds freed Linux in 1992, it fit into the last major gap in the GNU system. People could then combine Linux with the GNU system to make a complete free system. A version of the GNU system which also contains Linux. The GNU Linux system, in other words. Making them work together was not a trivial job. Some GNU components needed substantial change to work with Linux. Integrating a complete system as a distribution that would work out of the box was a big job too. It required addressing the issue of how to install and boot the system, a problem we had not tackled because we hadn't yet reached that point. Thus, the people who developed the various system distributions did a lot of essential work, but it was work that, in the nature of things, was surely going to be done by someone. The GNU project supports GNU Linux systems as well as the GNU system. The Free Software Foundation funded the rewriting of the Linux-related extensions to the GNU C library so that now they are well integrated, and the newest GNU Linux system used the current library system with no changes. The Free Software Foundation also funded an early stage of the development of the Debian GNU Linux. Today, there are many different variants of GNU Linux systems, often called distros. Most of them include non-free programs. Their developers follow the open source philosophy associated with Linux rather than the free software philosophy of GNU. But there are also completely free GNU Linux distros. The Free Software Foundation supports computer facilities for a few of them. Making a free GNU Linux distribution is just not a matter of eliminating various non-free programs. Nowadays, the usual version of Linux contains non-free programs too. These programs are intended to be loaded into I/O devices when the system starts, and they are included as a long series of numbers in the source code of Linux. Thus, maintaining free GNU Linux distributions now entails maintaining a free version of Linux too. Whether you use GNU Linux or not, don't confuse the public by using the name Linux only. Linux is the kernel, one of the essential major components of the system. The system as a whole is basically the GNU system with Linux added. When you're talking about this combination, please call it GNU Linux. Comcast and other cable giants sue Maine over law forcing them to let customers pay for specific channels. Comcast and cable giants, including Fox, CBS, and Disney, are suing the state of Maine and 17 municipalities over a recently passed state law that mandates cable TV operators allow subscribers to pick and choose which channels and programs they want to pay for. In other words, the subscribers want a la carte services. The law in question mandates that a cable system operator shall offer subscribers the option of purchasing access to cable channels or programs on cable channels individually. Democratic Governor Janet Mills did not sign the bill, but allowed it to be passed into law. Comcast and the other companies are suing to prevent its implementation on September the 19th, arguing that it is preempted by federal law. The Federal Communications Commission, however, indicated in a letter to state officials that it views the matter as unsettled. In other words, they didn't say yes, they didn't say no. Maine Public Advocate noted that providers had successfully argued that in other debates in the past, but Federal Communications Commission told the Public Advocate that whether the state law would be preempted was a question of first impression. I don't know what that means, and there were no commission rulings that addressed the a la carte issue. Advocates of the law also pointed to an FCC statement that says there is no law that requires or prohibits cable companies to offer channels or programs on an a la carte basis. The company's lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court asked the court to delay the September 19th date and throw out the law entirely on the grounds that both federal preemption and the First Amendment. Cable companies say that bundling packages of channels allow them to subsidize a wide variety of programs that would otherwise not survive. They also argue that it puts them at a competitive disadvantage to streaming services and satellite TV. According to Ars Technica, the plaintiffs wrote in court documents that programmers often negotiate license fees with cable operators based on tiered carriage, and eliminating such carriage would force programmers to charge higher license fees to cable operators, which ultimately would be passed on to subscribers. Ars Technica noted that the 17 municipalities are named because they have the authority to enforce state law, with a list covering Maine municipalities where Comcast has franchise agreements. A 2012 piece in Atlanta argued that the battle over bundling is really a battle between streaming upstarts and cable TV, the most dependable and lucrative business model in modern entertainment history. Customers who watch a large amount of TV on premium channels are essentially subsidized by other customers who watch far less. On the other hand, The Atlantic wrote, the internet is ruthlessly efficient at stripping cross subsidies and allowing content to shine on its own, as it did in the music and print journalism businesses. On the other hand, the price of cable TV has skyrocketed in recent years as cable operators try to preserve the status quo, which critics have argued is only hastening the demise of the bundle. In some cases, cable internet companies also try to force the customers to purchase TV packages to get faster internet connections. Far too long, the customers have been forced to purchase cable TV packages, which includes dozens of channels the consumer has no interest in watching. This is a case that's going to be worth watching. Most of the robocalls you get aren't coming from AT&T, Sprint, and T-Mobile numbers. A new report suggests that the United States' top mobile carriers are making headway in the fight against annoying robocalls. The data analytics company, Transaction Network Services, that's TNS, released its biannual robocall report, and some of the emerging unwanted call trends included an increase in hijacking mobile numbers and a shift to spoofing toll-free numbers. However, the most promising news for consumers was that only 12% of high-risk calls received during the first 6 months of 2019 originated from numbers owned by AT&T, CenturyLink, Comcast, Sprint, T-Mobile, and Verizon. These carriers account for 70% of the nation's overall call volume. TNS said that the top-tier carriers are successfully blocking more robocalls. It added that regulatory and policy action, as well as the adoption of AI and advanced data analytics, more difficult for bad actors to place scam and fraud robocalls. It's too soon to call that a victory. The report suggests the need for diligence as the battlefront may shift to smaller regional and rural carriers further behind on their path to a call authentication framework and utilizing core data analytics. On average, Americans receive 200 million unwanted calls per day during the first half of the year. The report found that nuisance calls, which included prank calls, telemarketing calls, and silent calls, are on the rise. Overall nuisance calls increased 38% from the third quarter of 2018 to the second quarter of 2019. TNS found by analyzing 1 billion daily call events across hundreds of carriers that high-risk calls, which are likely made by scammers, grew 28% over that period. Robocalls are getting more sophisticated. If your smartphone has been ringing off the hook with calls from supposedly local numbers, then you may be the target of a neighbor's spoofing, which happens when scammers try to trick you into picking up a call that seems like it's coming from a neighbor. Not only are these types of spam calls on the rise, but they're also getting more sophisticated, according to TNS. Neighbor spoofing now accounts for 25% of all negative calls, up 6% from 2018. And high-tech spammers are now spoofing calls over several telephone numbers in low volumes and then churning through them quickly to evade being detected, a tactic known as snowshoe spamming. More phone numbers are getting hijacked. Telemarketers have been known to use local phone numbers to mask their calls, and the likelihood of them using actual numbers that belong to someone is still pretty low, but it's happening more often. Robocall hijacking of mobile numbers more than doubled at the start of this year, according to TNS. 1 in 1,700 mobile numbers is being hijacked by robocall spoofers every month, which is more than double last year's figure of 1 in 4,000 mobile numbers. Robocallers are also shifting to toll-free numbers, which presents a challenge to legitimate companies as customers don't know which incoming calls are real. How secure is a Chromebook when compared to a PC and a MacBook? There is no exact answer. Some measure security by the number of reported vulnerabilities. This assumes that all vulnerabilities have equal impact. That's not the case. Some measure security by the number of reported incidences. This does not take into account there are systems with a very large installed base of users. Some measure security by the number of vulnerabilities found in lab tests. The flaw in logic is that it assumes the lab tested for all known vulnerabilities. And that's not the case. They have only tested every known identified vulnerabilities, not existing vulnerabilities. It's been claimed the Chromebook is the most secure system as it is nearly impossible to hack. Well, how safe is the Chromebook? Google just released the following. There is a U2F ECDSA vulnerability. What's that? It is a security key two-factor authentication. It is an authentication method in which a computer user is granted access only after successfully presenting two or more pieces of evidence or factors to an authentication mechanism. Google discovered vulnerability in their H1 security chip firmware concerning ECDSA signature generation. Google confirmed that the incorrect generation of the secret value allows it to be recovered, which in turn allows the underlying ECC private key to be obtained. Thus, attackers that have a single pair of signature and signed data can effectively compute the private key, breaking any functionality or protocols that uses the key pair in question. If you've been getting a notification saying internal security key requires reset, is this a related problem? The answer is yes. What equipment is affected? Well, these are all Chromebooks that have the H1 security chip installed on it. Instead of going through the minutiae of technical detail, but just want to fix your account security, just follow these steps. Double check whether you're affected. This is about the experiment built-in security key function where your Chromebook acts as a security key that you can trigger by pressing the Chromebook's power button. If you never use this feature, well, you can stop reading now. Make a list of your accounts with websites where you have registered the built-in security key. These are at risk because the built-in security key can potentially be faked by an attacker without the attacker having your Chrome OS device. Unregister the built-in security key from all these services. Exact instructions vary by service, but typically there are account settings or security settings that list registered security keys and give you the option to remove all unregistered security keys. There is no need to change passwords or other account security settings. Review recent successful logins to services to determine whether there's anything suspicious. In case you receive an internal security key requires reset notification, click Reset on the notification to prevent it from showing again. Please be advised that the built-in U2F authenticator feature remains in beta status at this point. Let me get this right. The Chromebook is not vulnerable if I don't use the security key two-factor authentication. That is like saying if I don't use a lock on the door, I won't have a problem with a lock, although the door still remains unlocked. Is the Chromebook most secure? I'll leave it up to you. Earlier in April of this year, we reported that Facebook was secretly working on gathering patient data from hospitals. Since then, some of the hospitals have withdrawn from providing Facebook any data. Facebook had initially focused its research on cardiovascular health. None of the statements from Facebook to date sound as if it's putting an end to the program. Perhaps Apple have learned a lesson from this. They are being open about a new project. Apple is launching a research app that will allow U.S. consumers to participate in health studies. Apple is launching a new research app for Apple Watch owners that will allow people to opt to privately contribute to health research by sharing the data collected from the smartwatch and its many sensors, as well as the Apple Health app. The news of the app was announced at the Apple's iPhone press event alongside a trio of new health studies and the next generation Apple Watch Series 6. As an example of the sort of data users could contribute through the Apple Watch, the company detailed a few new studies with partners like the University of Michigan, the World Health Organization, Harvard School of Public Health, the National Institute of Health, the American Heart Association, and the Brigham and Women's Hospital. The topics to be studied include the long-term effects of sound on your hearing health, how menstrual cycles can inform the screenings for infertility and osteoporosis, and how activity and movement impacts overall health. All this is very personal data. Before, people who wanted to opt into health studies through Apple's partnerships would have installed a specialized app on their iOS device dedicated to that study alone. The new research app will instead allow for a single portal for this sort of opt-in activity. Apple also promises to respect users' data privacy, saying that you decide what data you want to share with the studies, and that Apple cannot access any information that directly identifies you. The research app will launch in the United States later this year. Apple is launching a new research app for Apple Watch owners that will allow people to opt to privately contribute to health research by sharing the data collected from the smartwatch and its many sensors, as well as the Apple Health app. The AT&T Verizon partnership raises antitrust eyebrows. AT&T Time Warner recently announced that they were entering into an agreement worth approximately $9 million, which is chump change, with Verizon to manage their email services and web portal. While the news may have only been noticed, this deal should matter a great deal to all Americans, as it is a further consolidation of interest between the two of the three largest telecom companies in America. What many Americans may have forgotten is that AT&T was originally founded by the inventor of the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, and became the telephone company with 22 local subsidiaries. The Reagan administration used the nation's antitrust laws to break up Ma Bell in 1984. Verizon is the result of a 1994 merger between two of the so-called Baby Bells, Bell Atlantic and New York Next, which were spun out from Ma Bell and have subsequently become the largest wireless carrier and the third largest telecom company in America. AT&T Time Warner, for its part, just last year won a bruising antitrust battle against the U.S. Department of Justice when a federal judge found that the merger between AT&T and Time Warner was legal under our nation's law. Fresh off of this massive vertical integration play, the company somewhat shockingly entered into this small deal with its largest current competitor in the hot 5G wireless space to manage email and web portal customer relations on their behalf. The effect for customer is that Verizon will be managing AT&T's Time Warner's most significant consumer-facing digital property. Those consumers chose to entrust their data privacy to AT&T Time Warner, not Verizon. Yet this deal would put AT&T Time Warner tens of millions of customers' data squarely in the hands of its competitors, leaving a skeptical outsider to wonder about their long-term motivation. With multiple bidders, including the incumbent contract holder, vying for the contract, somehow AT&T Time Warner entered into an agreement with one company that it should have kept at arm's length, Verizon. Let's be clear, it isn't that either AT&T Time Warner or Verizon are bad companies. It is that consolidation and cost sharing are very alluring in the very expensive world of developing the communication links of the future. Where wireless spectrum leases can sink or swim a company's future, and when the two currently dominant players in the spectrum marketplace start playing footsie by entering into seemingly innocuous vendor agreements, that operational integration raises red flags. And while the government has no business picking winners and losers, we cannot forget the lessons learned in the aftermath of the Reagan breakup of AT&T, that strong competing companies in the telecom space create innovation and drive down costs while enhancing the customer experience. As our nation faces challenges from around the world, it is this type of intense competition which gives us the cutting edge and advantage over the monolithic state-run competitors around the world. While it is premature to urge a federal regulatory inquiry into this tiptoe towards collusion, AT&T Time Warner executives would be well served to do a cost analysis of whether the hacker is likely to be raised over this small dollar vendor agreement are worth the potential liabilities that it might invoke. Sometimes discretion is the better part of valor, and this would be a good time for AT&Time Warner to engage in a strategic retreat before anyone actually starts paying attention to it. From the IT Pro Series, presenting Benjamin Rockwell with business-level tech support.
It's time to get down to business, and this is Benjamin Rockwell. This is where I give you some tidbits from my experience of being an IT professional for many decades. And there's a lot of different things that I deal with. And one of the things that I recently spoke about was the difference between technical support for a consumer-based PC versus something that's going to come with enterprise-level technical support. One of the big things that I really covered was the idea that a call to tech support, if you're on an enterprise arrangement, on a business arrangement, is that it's generally handled within the United States. That's a big selling point for a lot of companies. There are some people who have a language barrier issue with dealing with overseas, especially since there are some companies which will say that they do not spend a whole lot on their technical support. So the people that are overseas may be struggling with English as a second language, or even as a third language. And when I say struggling, well, we've had our experiences. We've all dealt with this before. In this case, this is only one small component of your entire experience when you're dealing with support. An enterprise-level support, a business-level support on any kind of a business PC versus a consumer PC is going to be different because they are interested in your business over the long term. They're interested in making sure your computer is up and running. What that means is a lot of the different options that are available for business support include things like, yes, we will have somebody out there in person to fix your computer in a matter of a day, 24-hour response time, or 8-hour response time, or even 4-hour response time. Now, you do pay for that as a business, but it's an option that's generally only available to the businesses. What happens if you're a consumer? What happens if you're a small office, home office kind of situation? We call that SOHO. And basically, if you're dealing with that, imagine you have a problem with your computer, and I've had to deal with this before. You take your computer, and you take all of the information that's on your computer, you take it and you put it into a box, and you ship it somewhere. And that computer is out of sight, out of mind, not for a day, not for a week. Generally, 2 weeks is what they say, but it winds up being more like 3 weeks or more. Can you afford to be without your computer, your personal computer? Mind you, this isn't business, or is it? So we deal with a lot of things with our own personal computers that are on some level of a business level. What are we doing? Well, yeah, we do need to check our email from home on occasion. We do job hunt on a regular basis. And, yeah, we keep in touch with the world. This is how we look up information. This is how we deal with our lives today in the information age. But that world isn't shifting. We still have to send off our computers. They're not going to send out somebody in person. Again, enterprise-level support, they're going to do that. The tech support that we get also when we're dealing with professional computers, when we're dealing with the business computers, is on a different level. You know, we sometimes deal with some people in the tech support world that are asking us, and we're having to answer some very rudimentary, basic questions. Did you reboot your system? Yes, I rebooted my system. Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do this? Did you do that? And it takes longer. So there are distinct differences, but it's kind of like the difference of buying a used car from a used car dealership or buying a brand new luxury or even borderline luxury car from, I don't know, we'll say the Mercedes dealership. That used car dealership, yeah, they're not going to give you a loaner if you have a problem with your car. The Mercedes dealership, yes, they're providing a nice little loaner, and they're also giving you kind of that white glove service. The same thing happens in the business world, and yes, the businesses do pay for that. They wind up paying, I would say, probably an additional 10% above and beyond the additional amount of money that they're spending on higher-end PCs. So we put all the money together. We put all of these different things together. Yes, you're buying this PC. We're putting in more expensive items, which means greater reliability. We're also going to put in some faster CPUs. We're putting in a little bit of a different CPU with this tweak, that adjustment, this whatever. We're putting in a little bit more memory. It's all designed to load up Windows faster, load up Office faster, load up some of the business applications faster, but it's not going to react quite the same way with some video game that is really, a completely different design altogether. And then we add in, yes, that technical support where, yeah, they can be out there real quick, or, yeah, the different people that are answering the phones. Here in the States, it costs a little bit more for technical support. And, yes, the white glove service. But it's sometimes worth it. Personally, I actually find that it's worth it. I find that dealing with the professional level technical support is so much easier. It's so much nicer. But that's my experience. You may have different experience. We all have different experiences. That's what makes life so fun, I guess. This is Benjamin Rockwell. Back to you, Hank.
Thank you, Benjamin. Apple's tech innovation with the iPhone is in catch-up mode. Another year and another new iPhone. Apple's expectation is the consumer replaces their cell phone every year as there are new meaningful features introduced each year. The iPhone's legacy extends back more than 10 years to 2007. The iPhone represented a brand new approach to cell phone design, with Apple implementing innovative features. But the annual new features introduction is developing into update fatigue. The updates are features found in competitors' products. The iPhone 11's tech launch doesn't live up to the reputation of Apple being a tech leader. The new iPhone introductions are less about the latest technical innovations from Apple. Last year, Apple introduced the iPhone XR, which cherry-picked many of the best features from the iPhone X and XS, and then put them into a more affordable package. Now we have the iPhone 11 and iPhone 11 Pro. Aside from a new triple camera module, what else is really new? Sure. Apple included a brighter screen, a new A13 Bionic chip, and a better battery life. The addition of the Dolby Atmos audio and support for Wi-Fi 6, well, that's nice too. The pace of Apple's tech innovation has been slowing down. Apple is one of the 3 biggest smartphone makers in the world. Incremental improvements like these should be the baseline. LG, Huawei, and Samsung and others already released phones with at least 3 rear cameras. Some of these, like the Mate 20 Pro and the LG V40, are over a year old. Same goes for the iPhone 11's new dedicated night mode, which comes almost a year after Google introduced Night Sight on its Pixel phones. The iPhone 11 is more about playing catch-up than serving as a platform for breakthrough innovation. However, what's even more concerning with all the improvements we didn't get, including features that at one time seemed like surefire inclusions, such as reverse wireless charging and native support for the Apple Pencil. Reverse wireless charging makes traveling with the compatible smartwatches and other gadgets so much easier, and it's a shame the iPhone 11 didn't get that functionality. The lack of reverse wireless charging feels like a significant omission. With reverse wireless charging, you can use your phone to lend some extra juice to a friend in need to use it to recharge other gadgets or accessories like your Apple Watch. Not being able to do the latter, it's a bigger deal than it might seem. Because with reverse wireless charging, the next time you go on a trip, you can leave your smartwatch charging cradle at home and use your phone as a charging pad. Instead, on phones like the Galaxy S10 and Huawei Mate 30, you can even have the phone plugged in while you're doing this so that you can charge both the phone and the watch at the same time. That's really much more convenient. Meanwhile, the lack of support for the Apple Pencil on the iPhone 11 feels like a missed opportunity for Apple to challenge phones like the Galaxy Note 10. Over the past year, Apple has steadily been adding compatibility for the Apple Pencil to nearly every iPad, including the brand new 10.2-inch standard iPad. Also, with Apple's reliance on 3D infrared dot projectors for Face ID, it seems like Apple has hit a wall when it comes to minimizing the size of the notch and moving closer to a truly all-screen design, where it is all possible support for stuff like high refresh rate ProMotion display that you get on the iPad Pro, no bump in base storage. Apple is sticking with a 64 gigabyte instead of the 128 gigabyte or 256 gigabyte like you get on the high-end Samsung or Huawei phone. What makes the iPhone 11 Pro worthy of its tag Pro? Well, at least Apple will finally include a beefier power brick with the iPhone 11 Pro, so you don't need to buy extra gear to get full fast charging speeds. Sorry, regular iPhone 11 buyers, that model still comes with that 5-watt charger instead of the 18-watt adapter included with the Pro. And all of this doesn't even factor in other rumored new features that may or may not show up on the Apple 2020 iPhones, like the addition of an in-display fingerprint reader or support for 5G. Yeah, Apple doesn't have 5G, and many of the others already have it. Of course, with Apple, wait till next year. For years, a lot of people have been worried that the pace of Apple's tech innovation has been slowing down, and with the iPhone 11, well, it seems to hit home on that. Windows 10 1909 update is most unusual. The way Microsoft plans to roll out the next version of Windows 10 this fall is almost certainly a precursor for future autumn upgrades. Microsoft has acknowledged that this fall's feature upgrade for Windows 10 will be virtually identical to the already available version 1903 that was released in May. 19H1, which means the first half, and 19H2, which is in the second half of the year, share the same servicing content. That means they share the same cumulative update package. 19H1 and 19H2, better known perhaps as 1903 and 1909, respectively, in Microsoft's four-number labeling format. Microsoft confirmed that the fall upgrade 1909 will be nothing like previous Windows 10 editions. Instead, it will be a barely changed retread of Spring's 1903. That Windows 10 1909 will resemble an old-style service pack was not news. 19H1 and 19H2 share the same servicing content. This is actually fairly clear. The two upgrades, 1903 and 1909, that are now being tested and will be released this fall, presumably simultaneously, are identical in content. That means they share the same cumulative update package, particularly to packaging. Not only will 1903 and 1909 have identical content, but both will come in a single update. Microsoft has done the same with entire operating systems before, where one package can, with the right license key, install Home or Pro. Microsoft has targeted this month for the release of Windows 10 1909. Yes, it's official. Windows 10 1909 can be upgraded using the cumulative update only on a machine running Windows 10 1903. Enterprise corporations and others will be able to upgrade pre-1903 Windows 10, This means Microsoft will be packaging Windows 10 1909 in multiple ways. As a cumulative update from 1903, and as a standard upgrade from, say, 1607 that goes back to 2016, so the new 1903 makes it into the PC. The upgrade to 1909 will be identical to the latest update for 1903. Both 1903 and 1909 will come in a single cumulative update. That means that if you're already on 1903, don't worry about 1909, they're the same. Windows 10 1909 new features may or may not be turned on by Microsoft. If they are, it will be with what the company called an enablement package. Think of it as a downloaded code that frees up the features. Maintenance of Windows 10 1909 will be provided by the usual monthly cumulative updates. They may or may not be identical to what is served up to 1903. Is that 1909 has a few features that 1903 lacks. Although Microsoft has said that it is unknown at this point whether 1909 is the new pattern for the 4-feature upgrade, it probably is, and it probably will be the template for 2020 and beyond. There's no way Microsoft would invest this kind of time and resources creating an entirely different kind of upgrade and servicing model and then use it only once. Net, in other words, after all is said and done, if you are running 1903, you are updated. If you are not running 1903, you may very well be updated to 1909, which essentially brings you to the same as 1903. If that all sounds confusing, yeah, it does for someone who is non-technical. Presenting Tech Perspectives with Marty WInston on Winterizing Personal Tech.
If the very thought of winter sends shivers across your spine, imagine how your electronics must feel. You're warm-blooded, them not quite, at least not all. When it gets frosty out, do you feel it in your bones? When there's ice on the windshield, is your car sometimes a little harder to start? Ever have a problem getting the key in the car door? See, you already know some of what cold can do to mechanical and electrical things. And maybe you've already connected those dots. I want to share some tricks with you that can help keep the frosty, chilly cold of winter from pulling some of the more annoying stunts that are in its bag of tricks. If you've been listening for a while, you've probably heard me explain that high temperatures, heat, can often shorten the life expectancy of many kinds of electronic devices, and that component failures usually mean total device failures. Heat makes them die young. On the other hand, cold can make them work like they've reached old age, reducing their ability to perform, sometimes even denying an ability to perform. That's especially true of batteries. Why? It's chemistry, baby. Batteries make electricity flow as the result of a chemical reaction, and different kinds of batteries use different recipes for that. Not all the recipes work at low temperatures. Some of them may start fading at 40 degrees. What do I mean by fading? It depends on the battery and its recipe, but here are some of the possibilities. One is that a battery simply acts like it's dead and delivers no juice. And it may or may not revive if you can warm it up to something close to room temperature, or it may actually be dead. Some may run, but not for nearly as long as you're expecting. That can happen a lot for the batteries in flashlights that are kept in the glove compartments of cars that are parked outdoors. Some of those batteries could even crack and spill acid. Is there a battery in your doorbell button? That's often among the first to go. How about the outdoor part of your indoor-outdoor thermometer? For things that use standard cells, like AA, AAA, CD, 9-volt square, if those things get exposed to outdoor temperatures and you need them to work, buy the lithium recipe alkaline cells, because those tend to keep working even in severe extreme cold. You may have some battery-operated electronic things that are only on some of the time and warm up when they are, even just a little. Then when they're off, they cool down again. That kind of cycling invites ice forming at battery contacts and sometimes at other connectors, occasionally even lifting components off of circuit boards. I'm not sure what you can do to prevent that. I do know that some nano-lubricants on battery contacts can help. The one I use is called Corrosion X, and I'm happy with its results. Corrosion X. And once your smartphone takes a nosedive into the snow, you can expect temporary or even permanent damage. Remember, your fingers will be made clumsier by the cold and less sensitive by any gloves or mittens you may be wearing. Do you wear glasses? Ever have them totally fog up in the winter? How about frost on your windshield? Frost can blind outdoor surveillance cameras. Anti-fogging solutions, the ones that are used on photographic gear or car windshields, can also help surveillance cameras, especially the domed ones, but plain glass lens, try it. But now, the plot thickens, as in thicker than frost, all the way to ice or snow. Back when path lighting used incandescent bulbs, the heat they produced would often be enough to keep the snow off of them. Not so much modern LED path lights. Snow can block gate lights, wall wash lights, front door lights, and others like them. They become incapable illuminators. And those colorful strings of holiday lighting, well, they may have their own problems getting totally eclipsed by snow. I don't recommend applying a lot of heat to clear those lights, but under some conditions, try this, don't try this, a leaf blower may do some good. There's one other place where snow and ice and cold can get into your electronics, even when those electronics are indoors, in places where they don't get cold. You see, extreme winter weather adds a lot of heavy weight to power lines, to tree branches, and to other things that can create corruption in your electrical power feed, not to mention slippery roads that encourage bumpy encounters between motorists and power poles. And power line disruptions can fry both indoor and outdoor AC-powered equipment. Surge protection can help protect AC line-powered gear, but remember, plug-in surge protectors are generally worthless at protecting after 2 years or so. And those little green lights on them have actually no connection to reality. It has nothing to do. Those lights have nothing to do with whether or not any surge protection is really still happening. Now, you can replace those plug-in surge protector things with new ones every 2 years. That's a good idea if you're using those. My own choice, for me, was to have an electrician install a whole house surge protector. Mine is made by a company named Total Protection Solutions, and I absolutely love it. Next time, I'll be talking about the black and green of the holidays. No, it isn't about the Pan-African flag. It's about all the shiny new gizmos hitting the market as we enter the busiest shopping season of the year, a time that the industry depends on for black ink and green money. And I promise, we're not having a pledge week.
Thank you, Marty. Public service announcements of computer club meetings in the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut tri-state region. The computer clubs have random access sessions at each of these club meetings. If you have any questions or need for technical advice, the club members are more than happy to assist. There is no such thing as a dumb question. All these computer club meetings are open and free to the public. The Brookdale Computer Users Group will have their 40th anniversary on September the 26th. Meeting time is 6:45 p.m., and the topic of presentation is the sunset of Windows 7. They meet at the Middletown Library Large Meeting Room at 55 New Monmouth Road in Middletown, New Jersey. The Computer Learning Center at Ewing will have a presentation on likes, tweets, and regrams, an overview of social media. Tuesday, October the 1st, meeting time is 2 p.m. in the afternoon at the Ewing Senior and Community Center at 999 Lower Ferry Road in Ewing, New Jersey. The Westchester PC Users Group will have a presentation on online privacy, Thursday, October the 3rd. Meeting time is 7 p.m., and they meet at the Keller Williams Realty, 120 Bloomingdale Road in White Plains, New York. Amateur Computer Group of New Jersey meets Friday, October the 4th. Meeting time is 8 p.m., and they meet at the Scotch Plains Rescue Squad at 1916 Bartle Avenue in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. We hope to see you at one of these meetings, and if you have a computer club meeting that you want me to announce on the air, send me a note My address is hank@pcradioshow.org. Our website is pcradioshow.org. We can be heard each Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on prn.fm, streaming on the Internet. Podcast of the program is available on prn.fm, on the Internet, and pcradioshow.org. If you have any questions for me, just send me an email addressed to hank@pcradioshow.org. There is no such thing as a stupid question. In the meantime, stay in touch and remember to do regular backups. I'm Hank Key, and on behalf of Joe King and Michael Horowitz, we thank you for listening. Stay safe and healthy until we meet again, same time, same station next week.